a general discussion about mental health. It is not to be interpreted as specific advice for a specific situation. Every situation is unique and requires advice to be tailored and adapted to that situation. All information in this broadcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional mental health services. If you or a loved one are experiencing mental health distress, please speak to a licensed professional in your area.
It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change. Living well. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change.
Living well takes a community. So remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share with a friend. Welcome to another episode of Living Well, where we attend to the mind, to the heart, to the body, and the soul. Well, we're continuing our series on, you guessed it, dating. Now, maybe you're married, but maybe you know some people who are out there who've been unlucky in love. Well, if that is so, then this is the episode for you. Tonight, we're going to talk about dating in this millennium. Like, how are people meeting? Are you swiping up, swiping down, swiping left, swiping right? Do you have the apps on your phone, or are you still kind of walking through the grocery store looking at who's checking out the bananas? Well, either way, we're gonna have some tips and some tools for you to try to find, put yourself in position, I'll say, to find the person who you might spend the rest of your life with. So stay tuned, grab a paper, grab a pen. You are not going to wanna miss the tips and the tools that we have for you. I'm Dr. Erica, and this is Living Well. You guessed it. It is time for our water cooler conversation, where we come out of our offices, get our water cups, and stand around and talk about some hot topics, things that are on fire in conversation today, social media today. And boy, do we have one for you, dating. But before we jump into it, let's take a look at this clip.
Are you suggesting that everyone you meet, whether in a bar or in the street, that they're always being genuine and authentic? I mean, because before dating apps, I mean, we all know how people,
but you can
told you
feel
stories.
that more in person. You can feel that charlatan. You can feel that trickster. But you can feel it. Like you can tell if you guys mesh instead of just devoting your time to this app. You know what I'm saying? And
so I'll put it this way: consider the dating app as a concert or as a night at the bar. It's not. It's how you get to a place, right? You don't necessarily meet them on the app. You meet them when you actually meet them in person. So whatever brings you to meeting them, it's all the same. It's
just a vehicle to get
like
started.
you go to a Jay-Z concert, you meet a woman. That concert is the app per se.
I see what
because
you're saying.
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Tinder is your we meet here. So you might not know everything. Maybe their profile is all BS. The moment you see them, you have that opportunity.
A vehicle to get you.
It's the vehicle.
To the
It's all vehicles to get you.
But I still want to use it.
And mind you, I'm coming from a person who never used it. I never used dating before I met my fiance. I never used dating apps. I just naturally met people.
I just think people over-index and people use Instagram as a dating app for all intents and purposes. You know what I mean? And
Facts,
what you see from these pictures and a few things from someone's respective highlight reel, that's Instagram is like a magazine. You know, giving you all my best shots, like hey, versus like you don't get to understand the essence of who you are until you get the chance to connect in person. And so I just think connecting in person is far more authentic than just relying on some photos.
Online dating, men having a discussion about online dating. Thoughts, Dr. Lark?
Seeing how I have absolutely no experience in that area. I don't have no skin in the game because I've been in this marriage game for a long time. However, there were some very valid points made. I really enjoyed listening to men and their take on this whole online dating thing, but I could see points on both sides. I could see points on both sides. I will say I especially like the idea of it's just a vehicle. It's just one way. That I think sums it up for me.
I agree. You know, I often say that I don't like the term online dating. And, you know, now there's apps as well. And I don't like saying we met online or online meet. I like to think of apps and online as the introduction. You were introduced to this person. So I say online introduction.
Gotcha.
You don't meet until you see this person and you sit across from them. You don't start dating until you both agree that you want to take the relationship further. And, you know, this is our water cooler, so it's just us sitting around the water cooler. So, you know, I always like to do what we call in our profession a little self-disclosure.
Okay.
You know, my life, it's not an open book, but the book is cracked.
Okay.
It's cracked a little bit. But, you know, I met my wonderful, lovely husband online, on an online website. Well, we were introduced on an online website 13 years ago, and it worked out. It worked out. What was so interesting, and I was like, you know, God can move through the technology too, because we weren't attending Faithful Central, where we attend now, but we were attending another church that was relatively large. We found out, I just said it, we found out when we began to talk that we both attended the same church.
See?
We attended the same church, the same service, and actually parked our cars directly across the street from each other and had seen them before because we both have personalized license plates. And I'm like, I know your car. He's like, I know your car, but had never met.
See, that's a holy hookup.
It was.
A holy
It
hookup.
was. I'm like, we had to go on this national web dating website to meet somebody who we were going to church together at the same time.
So just think, if you had never at least gotten on the dating website, you guys were in the same circles, but never had a reason to bump into one another.
Exactly. Had never bumped up, had been to some of the same like non-Sunday activities, but had never bumped into each other. And what's so interesting, I don't think he will mind if I share this. When we were talking early on, when we had started dating, I said, if you had seen me at church, would you have talked to me? And he was like, no. And I was offended. Like, what? Wait a minute. What? And he said, because Erica, he said, I felt uneasy about going to church picking up women. He was like, I didn't feel like after a church service or something like that, I don't even feel like I should be looking at women in that way while we were at church. So he said, I never felt comfortable approaching a woman at church because I thought it was out of order.
Oh my
So
goodness.
interesting. So we could have even been sitting with each other and he trying to fight whatever, you know, might have been, you know, coming up in his, he trying to fight that. So you never know. You never know why, you know, someone might not come up to you in church, even though you find each other, you know, how they feel about it, what they think about it. And so it took us meeting online to be like, oh, we attend the same church.
That is so interesting. I know your husband, and never even knew that.
Yes.
As long as I've been here, I never even realized that. But you know what? That's such a valid point. How many other guys think like him, or how many other people just in general think like that? So another reason to not necessarily discredit online introduction, as you say.
Exactly.
You know, you people will miss out. And I mean, your story is a success story, and I know other people who have, you know, who have done it.
Right.
But I have also heard some horror stories too.
Right.
You know, with all this fishing and all that other kind of stuff. But again, I don't know a whole lot about it, but my assumption is that people have to build profiles and different things like that. And there's just so much false information that can be out there.
Right, that's true. But there's false information somebody could give you if they met you at the bus stop. I mean, people can give you the information. So it's about, just like what I say in my book, dating with your head and your heart. Right? So don't think that because we've talked online for 3 weeks, I know you. No, you don't.
Right.
And so I think sometimes having online communication or distance communication gives people a false sense of familiarity, that they're more familiar with each other or they know each other more than they actually do.
Right.
Because a person can tell you anything when you guys are away from each other. So I think the key for me, I think there are two keys for me. The first is that you use the sense, the smarts that God gave you as you're moving through relationships.
Right.
The other key that I would say is I see online dating or apps as one vehicle along with all of the others that you keep open, the other avenues that you keep open if you're dating and looking for a relationship, that it should not be the only way.
That's true.
In the same way that I don't think thinking that I have to meet somebody, going about my daily life and activities is the only way.
Right.
Right?
That's true.
So I think that keeping your head on swivel, whether you're meeting online through an app or in person, so keeping your sits and your wits about you, and also opening up as many avenues as you can to allow yourself to be available to be found or to find.
That's true. That's important. And I'll add to that because I love what the other young man said. Whether you meet him online, whether you meet him in the grocery store, whether you meet him in the
Concert,
mall,
you
you
said.
meet him in the concert, none of that negates you still having to gather data and be able to connect with this person.
That's
so
right.
like you said, don't throw it all in right then and there. You still have homework to do.
That's right.
Get to know the person, interact with them, begin to date and gather information.
right.
None of that negates your responsibility for doing that.
So now we're gonna ask you, are you doing your due diligence and gathering data? Well, you know what? We're gonna ask you to stop right there because we're gonna bring in our resident blogger, Mr. J. Patrick Wise, who's gonna join us on the set with his expertise. We two mature married women at this point. So we're gonna bring somebody in who has, a foot in the game as well, who can tell us a little bit more about some of the things that he's seen, experiences, and some things that he thinks about. So stay with us. We're gonna bring in J. Patrick. So you've heard all that Dr. Ronecia and myself had to say on the water cooler, and we have sat down now with our resident blogger, Mr. J. Patrick Wise. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us a perspective on this whole dating thing. Because we've been out of the game. She's been out of the game a lot longer than me. We've been out of the game for a while. You still dabbling all around the game, all around
Navigating water.
Exactly, around the dating game. So given that we saw a clip and we also did the water cooler around online dating and apps, what's your take? What you think about it?
I think it's a great way for people to meet. I personally haven't done the actual apps like the eHarmonies and the Match and the Tinders and all of those. But Instagram, for instance, Facebook, they're sliding in somebody's DMs. Slide. And sometimes that comes after maybe an evaluation process. Maybe you see the person's profile and you sense some level of compatibility, and you just kind of extend an invitation to connect and just see if there's any kind of mutual interest. But I think that's the way that a lot of people are meeting nowadays. Yeah.
But there's still a lot of people who are reluctant to do that, as we saw in the clip, of all ages. There are people who are just like, no, I don't want to do that, or that's so unnatural, and they don't know what they're going to get. And I look at those people and I'm like, well, you don't know what you're going to get at the gas station.
You're right.
When you meet somebody.
You really don't.
You have no idea of what you're going to get. And I agree. I think that, it's something that's becoming more and more popular. And really, given the times that we live in, I would even say it's necessary.
Even though it's completely foreign to me. But just, listening to what the guys were saying, I do think it might be necessary. At best, it's a good screening process.
Yeah.
I love what the guy said about using it as a vehicle.
Right.
Using it as a vehicle because, and that's a really good way to think about it. If I had to do it, that would really be a good way to think about it because we hear so many horror stories for people.
Right.
Some that have been a lot more serious, but there are a lot of different horror stories around it. So, I do think it's necessary. I do think it's necessary.
The thing that's funny about it is there's this problem with this proliferation of choices, right? Like you're on an app, you got Instagram, you got Facebook, whatever app you may be using, eHarmony. There's so many choices that you always are tempted to believe that there's a better choice.
Yeah.
So you raise your level of expectation. Every person has a certain level of expectation ascribed to them that is almost unrealistic. So people are putting off dating because they're waiting on this perfect person to come. Like we used to worship God, but now the person that we meet has to become the God figure in our life. They have to meet all of my needs physically, mentally, emotionally, intellectually, and I will bypass good people because I believe I'm deserving of this perfect person.
That's really, profound that you say that, and how having so many choices kind of puts us in this space of where we continue to look for the next choice or the next best thing. And looking for this perfect person, I think another challenge or some of the challenges that people face with dating apps and also just dating now and with social media is that there's this development of this unrealistic expectation, especially around physical presentation.
Wow.
Right? Especially there's this unrealistic between women and men.
Yeah.
It's not just men looking at women, but women also looking at men.
Yeah.
And even if you think about what comes across your feed, oftentimes those people who are pushed on these social platforms are people who look Hollywood ready, right? Physically, their hair, their makeup, the men with the six pack, running down the street. I was looking at TikTok and here go the guy running down the street with his shirt off on TikTok. I'm like, how did I get on this algorithm, right? But there develops this unrealistic expectation when you see somebody in real life, who is physically cute, but they don't have on all the makeup or the lashes, or they're not, a size 6 or, with double D. Like, then you're like, oh no, then that's not the one, or they're not good for me. Right.
So, but you're not even putting that same expectation on yourself.
There you go. Right. Oh, that part.
Like, I don't go to the gym, I don't work out, I don't eat healthy, but the person I get with, they check all 6 feet, 6 pack, 6 figures. They better have it all.
All of them. All of them. All of them. That's so interesting.
And but then that makes me wonder, how can I have this expectation and have this false sense of expectation when, like, again, what the young man was saying, it's just through this connection. I haven't really spent any time with you. I haven't really been able to gather any data from you. I mean, that's really difficult to do, just kind of going, back and forth. But how am I able to really experience you if all I've done is just rely on what you post on social media?
They'll Google you.
Yeah.
So sometimes,
Google? Yes.
So you'll set up a date with someone and y'all agree to meet, Thursday at 9 p.m. or whatever time it is. And within that 3 to 4 days, this person has Googled you, and whatever comes up is the information that they have about you. But then they'll act like they don't know any of this information.
Shut your mouth.
And let you talk about it and tell about yourself. But in actuality, it's like, oh, I Googled you, so I know some of this stuff already.
Because they can see your LinkedIn profile, they can see whatever other things that you've, that you've done or that you've gone on. Oh yeah.
Oh,
you've been pre-screened.
I'm so far removed from the game. But see, even that is so dangerous. Google don't get everything right.
No.
And that's technology. There are such things as false advertising.
Yeah.
People can put all kinds of information up there.
Right, but I'll also say, like, going back to your other point, what came up for me too is sometimes people are looking at profiles. It could be on Instagram, Facebook, or whatever, and they're actually judging the person based on how they think they'll look in pictures together. Like, is our coupling Instagram worthy?
Yeah. Are we reading power couple?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, what our kids gonna look like? Like, can we market our babies if we have cute babies?
Right, exactly.
It's a business decision.
Yep. It's very much a business decision.
Goodness.
And I'll say, I mentioned this in the water cooler. Like, I met my husband on an online dating site 13 years ago now. And one thing you talk about Google, and I talk about it also in my book, like some of the things to keep yourself safe. Like, I had a screen name, not my real name, because I am Googleable. Like, I am Googleable. And I was like, given what I do for a profession and all the people that I'm connected to. So I had an online screen name. I didn't give my real name. And then when I did give my real name, I just gave my first name.
Wow, okay.
And I had a Google Voice number. That wasn't my cell phone number, because you can trace back Google a number and it'll come to who that phone is registered to too. So I dated with a Google Voice. So there's certain things also, if you're going to be on apps and if you're going to be online, there are things that you can do to kind of keep yourself safe and to protect your information, because that's important too.
Yeah, you said something about people looking at a profile on a dating site or on social media and coming to some level of judgment. And I think that's something that even plagues the Christian community, particularly when we're talking about dating. Because one thing I think that keeps us from being disconnected, or keeps us disconnected, is what does it mean to be Christian? If I'm a guy looking for a wife, or there's a woman looking for a husband, and we both say that we're Christian, do we mean the same thing?
Right. Yeah, not
You know,
necessarily.
like how comfortable am I with your Christianity? People will come to me and say, Pat, introduce me to one of your friends or something like that. And the joking question that I pose, and it's somewhat serious, I'm like, how saved do you want him? Like
Newly saved?
Yeah.
Or,
Like, do you want the guy that's gonna say, hey, every Wednesday we're gonna fast? We need to pray before we go to bed every night or something like that before we get off the phone every night? Or is that too much? Like, what's your Christian compatibility in this dating world? Because you might not want to do that speaking tongues on Tuesday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You might not want it, but it's something you have to think about.
You're
because
right.
If you say Christian and I say Christian, we could literally mean two different things.
It's true.
It could be the guy who goes to church on Sunday, but he parties hard every Saturday night. It could be the young lady who does things on Instagram, but she's in church Sunday morning singing in the choir.
You're right. You're right. And that's something that I don't think many people think about.
Yeah.
Like I'm looking at, you said, 6 feet, 6 pack, 6 figures. I'm looking at those things,
Right.
but not really thinking about how are you walking out your faith and how does that jive? How does that, in sync with how I walk out my faith, or even how I desire to walk out my faith? Because I might not be doing those things. I might not be speaking in tongues, on Tuesdays, and going to prayer meeting, on Monday night. I might not be, but I might say, I would love to have someone who does those things so it can inspire me, or that we can do them together.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, they don't think about that.
Right.
A lot of people, especially I've seen in the church, they assume he go to church, I go to church, so we doing it the same way.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah. No. Not at all. Like, and that's that kind of like, I don't know if that's cognitive dissonance. Like this idea of like there's this drop off, and you got to like deal with that disappointment of seeing like, oh no, we go to the same church. I thought that we believed the same things. I thought that we had similar practices. Like this person may be into some other stuff in addition to their Christianity.
Right. You got to be watch out for that. And I'm going to take it a little step further.
Yeah.
What happens when your desire for a relationship out with another person, an intimate or romantic relationship, outweighs your desire for God?
Wow.
And so now they come in and you go to church every Sunday and you get up and you read your Bible and you meditate every morning. But he's like, well, the only time I can call you is during your scripture meditation time. So now I put that to the side so I can talk to him when he's driving on into work. And by the time he get there, it's time for me to get dressed. So now that time is gone away. Or on Sundays, he plays baseball or she plays in a league or she does something. So now I go with him or her to her obligation on Sunday so we can be together and I'm not in church. You got to be careful with that thing.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Yes, you do. That can actually be dangerous, and what I mean dangerous, not so much physically dangerous, but even spiritually dangerous, because then, like you said, I don't know what I'm going to get in you. So I'm making all of these sacrifices and possibly compromising my walk and my spiritual position and my practices on a daily basis for you. I don't even know if you're worth all of that. Yeah. Why? Because I haven't gathered enough data.
Yeah.
I haven't spent time in having a conversation and exploring these things and thinking about these things.
And nobody is worth that, because anyone who's going to have you compromise your relationship with your God is not the one for you, because they're separating you when your relationship should, and I don't like using shoulds all the time, but should help draw you closer to him, because he's supposed to be the head of the relationship.
Right.
That's one thing that I've seen that really plagues a lot of people in their pursuit for like a mate or a spouse, is that we, in the church, they'll call it being unequally yoked.
Right.
But we can both be professed Christians.
Right.
And still not be still not be compatible.
That's true.
And again, you're dealing with that, and when that happens time after time, month after month, year after year, now you start to get this sense of hopelessness and despair starts to creep in. And you gotta reevaluate and reassess.
And I also think along with that too, coming to the middle of the spectrum, you also have to be mindful of being too rigid as well.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
just because I speak in tongues on Tuesday, does that mean that the person that I'm with needs to?
Yeah.
And if they don't, am I being judgmental that you're not as saved as I am?
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you also have to be aware of where is my flexibility, and because I have certain spiritual practices, does that mean that my partner has to for us to be equal?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would argue not necessarily.
I would agree.
I would agree with that too.
Yeah, I would agree, not necessarily. I think there needs to be some foundational things.
Right, right.
Research shows that couples that worship together, that attend church services together, report higher levels of relationship satisfaction, also higher levels of connection, and their marriages tend to last longer by attending church service together. So, that might be the foundation, but, do we have to meditate on scripture every single morning when we wake up?
Right.
Maybe not, because maybe I want to sleep in. So
Yeah.
can we do Monday, Wednesday, Friday?
Yeah, maybe you want to watch the news.
Right,
Exactly.
exactly. So can we have a couple of days that we say this is our time together, and then we do our own, worship and meditating, reading scripture on our own the rest of the days of the week.
And that's very valuable, because oftentimes the couples that we see, that's one of the conflicts. One of the conflicts, couples will come in, and while all things are, under the communication umbrella, but more times than not, I have seen when couples come in and one's part, let's just take the wife, he's not getting up praying every day. I read my Bible every single day. He's not reading his. And so now she begins to feel like, okay, he's not being the head. He's not leading. Oh, he doesn't have a relationship with God, because the husband's walk doesn't look the same as the wife's walk. And that's a conversation that we have to have, in session sometime. It's like, to your point, they don't have to look the same.
Right.
You have your own individual relationship with God, and so do I. As long as there's a foundation and we agree this house shall serve the Lord, everything else in the middle, is up for discussion and we can talk about. But that's a source of conflict for a lot of couples, because they come in, one partner comes in with these expectations. Maybe they come from a family where they saw these practices walked out in the family and feel like this is what needs to happen in our household. And we all know that, what that looks like when we begin to take expectations from our family and then bring them into our current relationship.
What just came up for me was like a funny example of, like, let's say one person is like, all we can listen to is gospel and religious music.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And then, the other person, is like, oh, I want to slow dance with my wife. We slow dance into Amazing Grace.
Can't do it. Can't do it. Near the cross.
Get crazy. Oh, I know it was the blood, right?
You can't do that.
You
can't do that. I don't feel the love.
Exactly. The intimacy. I'm trying to be close to my husband.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
We don't have to be that deep.
Exactly.
Okay, that to me is a prime example. You so, what is it? You so heavenly deep, earthly good.
That's right.
That's it.
Come on now.
But expectations.
Right.
How often do expectations get us into trouble? Because that's exactly what disappointment is. It's like this difference between the expectation and the experience. Right? So people are disappointed to the degree that they place an unarticulated expectation on somebody, and then when they find out that that person is not that, they don't meet that expectation, now they're disappointed.
Yep.
And that's when we started getting into this dangerous language about all men being this way, all women being this way, and the chasm between us widens. And it's something I notice, even as I think about it now, is particularly problematic in the black community. Like there seems to be like this growing divide between black men and black women it shows up in a number of places, but definitely in this area of dating, relationships, coming together in marriage. There seems to be, thinking about dating, thinking about online, thinking about how we engage one another on digital platforms, there's almost like lines drawn in the sand that we can't connect to communicate, much less connect to get into a relationship and begin to think through marriage. And I wonder how much of the way that we interact with one another, how much of the way we perceive one another, just as human beings, is impacting our ability to bond, to unite, to date successfully, to marry.
Yeah. That's good. That's a good point. It makes me think about just going back to the book, Dating with Purpose, thinking about, you talking about how important it is for us to be aware
Right.
know who we are,
Right.
understand the messages, understand our behavior. And I'm wondering if part of the line that's drawn, part of the barrier to the ability to be able to engage in conversation and understand and whatnot may come from, just a lack of awareness that people are having about themselves and how they are interacting with others.
Right. I would also say that divide has been getting wider and wider over the decades. And I would argue that you mentioned for Black couples that a huge influence is media and social media.
Yeah.
So when you look at other forms of digital film, television, media, for decades, we really didn't see representations of our families,
Yeah. True.
right?
Yeah.
Of families and couples and marriages and healthy families. What was often portrayed was, struggle love or, baby mama, baby daddy, that kind of thing. And even when you look at, social media, again, I'm on social media, I'm older person, so I'm not even on the Gen Z stuff. But what comes across in those people who are touted as celebrities in our culture often have very tumultuous relationships. Like that's what's coming through the feed. That's what you see. That's what you see. Which is why I loved, the show Black Love. It's in its last season. And last year, my husband and I had an opportunity to be on Black Love. It was so fun. But it's one of the few shows that talks about Black people in relationships that look very different. There's no one size fits all, but it's sad that that's the only one.
Right.
But many of the folks that we see on TV who are celebrity, who the Black children look up to, their relationships are so tumultuous. And so it creates this idea that Black people aren't getting married, that, Black women are they're housewives behaviors, cussing each other out and fighting and throwing drinks, and that, the Black men are all cheating. So you continue to get these messages. And as you mentioned, we then use those prejudices when we look at each other and try to get together. So I'm already coming with a dirty lens when I look at you, expecting that you're going to be a deadbeat.
Right.
All you want from me is sex, that, you have some children that you're not taking care of, that you don't go to, I have all of these expectations and I'm just looking for any little thing that's going to confirm that expectation.
That's the one. That's the thing I was looking for.
Right,
Exactly.
right. See, there it is. I knew it.
You're just like the rest of them.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. And I think the same thing goes for, men looking at Black women. Like, oh, she gonna have an attitude. She gonna talk back. She gonna say she don't need a man. So we're coming with each other, not starting at zero. We're not starting at a neutral place. We're already starting where you're behind the start line. And so you're gonna have to do some work just to get to the start line.
And by the time you get to the starting line, you're tired.
Exactly. Right.
It's like I done worked so hard I done spent 1.5 years in this relationship maybe to get back to zero.
Yep. Yep.
And then going back to the church setting, people now saying, hey, when y'all gonna get married?
Right.
Like, bro, I'm tired. I'm tired. You know how much time it's taken just to get somebody to trust me?
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Just that I do what I say I'm gonna do.
Right.
Forget that you've seen it.
Right.
Like
Right.
getting you to believe it, right? Or in the flip side, same thing with women and some of the experiences that perhaps they have with men. It's like men having these walls up and these barriers up before they get vulnerable, before we open up and before we share perhaps the not so pleasant parts of ourselves. Right? For fear that we may be judged or it may be weaponized against us or something like that. It places the relationship in a strain from the beginning.
Yep.
And we aren't able to connect. We aren't able to experience the beauty that comes from two people coming together to accept one another, to love on one another, to affirm one another and all that good stuff. And these are just some of the things that keep us from connecting.
Right.
Like a disconnecting what it means to be people of faith, right? The psychological stuff, the traumatic stuff that maybe we deal with as Black people.
Right.
And then not to mention this whole idea of us having too many options and believing I deserve the best, like even if I'm not prepared to live that way myself, or even if I'm not currently living that way myself. How do we begin to think about like dating online. You mentioned something earlier, Dr. Holmes, about how you equipped yourself and you set up the Google Voice number. You didn't use a screen name. What are some other things, as people maybe thinking about dating online, maybe venturing into it for the first time? Like I said, I've never done it. What's some things you might recommend that we think about?
So, some of the things that I would recommend, and I say a few of them in my book, and there are also, there are also other books that are specific to how to get into online dating, but just a few that I think are really important. I said it in the water cooler talk. I don't say online dating, nor do I say online meeting. I say online introduction.
Wow.
So you were introduced to each other online.
Yeah.
You didn't meet until you sat across from that person, until you saw them, until you had a conversation and you're able to feel, what does it feel like? Because you have an intuitive sense. God has given us intuition. Another word we use for that is visceral. What is what's the response? What is the feeling you get in your gut?
Yeah.
And you can feel, some people have vibes, you can feel that. And so now we've met, we've seen each other. Oh, okay. And then you start to date when you're like, okay, we are going to go further than this, right? And so think about it as an introduction. And as was talked about in the water cooler snippet, that it's no different than if you met someone at the grocery store, at the gas station, or at the concert, that you don't start throwing all your eggs into one basket.
Right.
Having an online profile or an app should be just one of the ways that you are opening yourself up to be introduced, to meet people.
Yeah.
Some people exclusively date online, and I think that would be the same as exclusively thinking you're going to find your mate in the grocery store.
Right, or find them at church.
Or find them at church. All right, or find them at church. Bring it back. Bring it on back home.
Yeah.
So, I think thinking of having an online profile on an app as just one way that's opened up the avenues for you to potentially meet someone.
Yeah.
I think that's important. Another thing that I tell people all the time, your first in-person meeting should be a lunch date. Like how you had mentioned earlier about 9 o'clock going to dinner. No. No. It is a lunch date in the middle of the day, somewhere crowded, where you both drive and meet each other there.
That's good.
For several reasons. For safety reasons. You don't want this person, you don't want the person coming to your house. But so many people get lulled into a false sense of safety because you talked online for 3 months. It's too long. Don't be talking to people for 3 months. Don't. Y'all talk, and then y'all have a quick lunch meetup.
Yeah.
And after you have that lunch meetup, if you decide we're going to continue to get to know each other distance-wise until we get back, that's one thing. But the meetup should be soon into, so that you don't get all wrapped up. But also, so safety, but also lunchtime, most people work, and if they don't, that might be a flag. That might be red, it might be yellow, but it's a flag on the plate. Right, it's a flag on the plate. So most people have 45 minutes, 30 to an hour to meet for lunch. So you have a beginning and an end time. If you go out to a dinner at 9 o'clock and you find in the first 15 minutes that this ain't it, now you're trying to make up some, how am I going to get, now you can't even enjoy it. Exactly.
Call me, bro.
You got to go to the restroom and you like, girl, call me, it's an emergency. So now you're trying to make up, you can't even enjoy what you ordered. So now you're trying to make up a reason to give you a stop, a full stop. When it's lunch, you both know this is just us seeing each other in person and deciding if we want to go further with an actual date. So there's a natural beginning and end time. And you're in a place that's crowded, right? Because people are out for lunch. So, those are some things. I'm like, take your time and vet the person the same way that you would if you had met them any other place. Take your time and vet them. But you want to say, we did not meet until we saw each other in person and we both were like, not only for the physical, but also, how you act, how you behave. Are you telling the waitress off at the, at the lunch spot?
Right.
And you got an attitude. You know what I'm saying? Like, so those are some things. Really take safety precautions and be mindful in the way that you're moving forward.
That's good. That's good. Saints getting blessed.
It's so I think it's worth saying. It sounds like, again, I'm so far removed from this scene, but it sounds like though we hear a lot of, negative stories about online dating, we have one success here, but I can name a few people who have actually had success. And when I say success, not just in a relationship, but in marriage, including older people, like people in their 60s who met online, you know, over their 60s actually, met online, connected, and end up getting married and been married at least, maybe we're in the 6th year or something like that. So there's actually something really positive to come out about it. We just have to know how to engage and understand what we're looking for.
Right.
And we have to be cautious, because you do need to be cautious, but with good reason.
Right, and take it for what it is.
Yes,
right.
that's
So many
true.
people think, oh, I'm gonna get online and I'm gonna meet this person, I'm gonna get married. Like they're there. Take it for what it is. It is just one avenue to be introduced to people. It opens up like the pool. It just opens it up, but you still have to walk through it mindfully, you know, prayerfully, and with your good sense. You got to put your good sense out. You got to pull your good sense out your pocket.
Pull your good sense out.
Your pocket.
Yeah.
And walk through it and just see it as an avenue.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to stop here because y'all know when we get together.
Every time.
Every time, right? But we're going to stop right here. Let the people marinate on what we've said.
Yes.
But you know, every time that we close, we like to leave you with a resource. And, you know, just last night, Bishop Omer of the Faithful Central Bible Church in Inglewood, California, did a town hall. And that's coming up next. So stay tuned. In that town hall, he seeks to empower those who are dating to pick up their net, get some tools, do something different so that they can get the relationship that they desire. So stay tuned. And until we see you again, we pray that you are living well. For more information and resources, be sure to check us out at normalizehelp.org. And you can always email us at livingwell@faithfamily.org to get a question answered or to tell us a story. You never know, your question might make it to air or be the subject of one of our episodes. See you next week.
It's not too late to change, it's time to be the change. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. It's not too late to change, now it's time to change. Now it's time to change, now it's time to change. Now it's time to change, time to change, time to change.